Hey everyone, TA Sam here, and today we'll be going over Excel and also a little bit about how to do a decision matrix. So I'll actually use a decision matrix and also an AHP table. It's kind of an introduction to Excel. So I created a Excel sheet you can go download online, links included. Um, and if this is your first time opening Excel, you'll notice you have a couple tabs up here at the top. So you have your File tab, which is basically going to give you like creating a new workbook, opening past one, so you can see your stuff over there, yada yada yada, saving, exporting, things like that. And then the two tabs we're really going to worry about today are going to be the Home tab. So this is going to give you styling options, which you can see over here. Formatting, which I'll get into a little bit, but this lets you pick out different things for each cell. You can do like conditional formatting, so a little bit of styling, sorting, things like that. And so to jump right in, if this is your first time using Excel, each one of these little squares you see is called a cell, and it has a corresponding row, which you can see here is numbered, and a corresponding column, which typically goes in letters. Additionally, there's not really a limit, so you can see it kind of just goes on forever, and you can actually go all the way down. So you can see, uh, you keep running out of letters, and if you're to go the opposite way, you're going to go down. It goes to about like 11,000 or so. So no shortage on space. Um, and then to edit each cell, what you can do is you can either double click on it and it's going to bring you into a text editor. You can click on it, then click on the formula bar up here to edit the cell. You can just double click it, or, and this is what I want you to, in the long term, start to move towards, because it'll save you a lot of time, is doing everything on the keyboard. So you can just kind of keyboard around and then press F2. So again, that's F2, and then you can just edit the cells that way. And it's a lot faster. Or if you're just over, you can just start also typing, and it'll go like that as well. So anyways, moving forward, each cell will have a different format. So the default is just a general, and Excel will do its best to guess. You can also tell it you're trying to go for a number or a day or a time percentage, all these different options. And so the default, so let's say I was trying to do a formula. That's one of the big things that Excel is used for, is number calculation. So if I want to get the, let's say the result, I use 4 plus 5 up there. Let's say I want to know what 5 plus 10 is. I was to type 5 plus 10. It's not going to do anything because it thinks you're just typing text. It thinks you want to just write 5 plus 10 there. So you want to do the calculation. The big thing you have to do is an equal sign. And what the equal sign does is it tells Excel, no, I don't want to write this. I'm not just making a note to myself. I actually want to do some work here. I want to do a calculation. So the equal sign indicates you're doing a calculation. You could do 5 plus 10, and you can see there you get the answer of 15. This is the most basic use of the equal sign, but there's a lot of other things you can do. It's basically your indicator, and it's basically your indicator to Excel. You're trying to do a formula, and formulas open up a whole new world of possibilities. So you can see you can add up things, which we'll do in this video. You could do, I'll just hold the tab. There's all kinds of things here. So you can use, if you're doing financial analysis, which I don't think we'll be doing. You can do logic for those of you familiar with programming. If you're trying to do arguments, you can do different text things. So you can do things like joining the text to two different boxes. You can get days, weeks, and months. Lookup and reference, which is extremely helpful in a lot of different areas, especially this guy VLOOKUP. A lot of different math functions, which will probably be the most useful in this class. So again, I typed out sum earlier, but I can also get sum over here. And then a lot of statistical analysis. Your engineers, go through the engineering when you get a chance. Maybe you'll know more of these are than I do. And then I don't even know what these are. So again, the equal sign is the big indicator on that. So anyways, so now to apply a couple of things here and try to get a little more familiar, we're going to do an AHP example in the decision matrix. So I know in class that we did a car example, but the example I want to do here is actually for baseball. So I'm a pretty big baseball fan. And let's say I want to decide who the best baseball player is. And so for those of you who know baseball, this is like gross oversimplification, but for the casual person, this is pretty good. So you have hitting, so that's how well, a player can hit. So that's both for average, so you're getting a lot of hits, and then home runs, RBIs, if you're driving in runs, getting big hits. Fielding, how well you can field and throw the ball. So it's basically defense, hitting basically offense, and then running. So that's both in the field, stealing bases, scoring out there, and then the X factor. So that's anything else the players got going for them. So whether they play on my favorite team, whether or not they're fun to watch, things like that. And I've picked out 3 players that we'll evaluate. So these are our criteria, 4 different criteria, and then our 3 different options, or you can give them solutions, options, whatever you want to call them. I'm actually going to go back to options. So 3 players I picked out was DJ LeMahieu. So I'm a big Yankees fan, and he's currently the best healthy player on the team. Mike Trout, who's widely considered to not just be the greatest player right now, but one of the greatest players of all time. And Fernando Tatis Jr., who's younger than I am, which I think about a lot. And he's one of the most exciting players in baseball right now. And so we're going to evaluate who's the best out of these 3. And to do that, we'll do an AHP. So actually, if you look at the document I have up here, you can already see I've worked this out already. And so you can kind of read along. I made a lot of comments, but I'm going to rework it with you right now. And so I encourage you, if you're not familiar with what a AHP table is or a decision matrix, please pause the video right now and just look through these things on the left. So I've annotated how to fill these out, and I'm going to do it with you right now. But this is just kind of like a general format that you can follow. And so to start with the AHP table, it's good. An AHP table stands for an analytical hierarchy process, and it's used for developing weightings, or how important each factor or criteria that you're using is. And so you see here we're going to have our criteria both on the top and the bottom, on the top here, along here, and then the bottom here, or our Y and our X. And so the 4 criteria we have from the problem statement is hitting, fielding, running, and an X factor. So I'm going to lay those out here. So we have hitting, fielding, running, and the X factor as our 4 different criteria. And actually, I'll show you a quick cool Excel function because we have to put them down here. So if you highlight these, so you can do that by hitting Shift plus an arrow key, or you can also do something like this. And then you can either right-click and copy, or you can hit Control-C and copy. And then I can go down here, and I'm going to paste it. But there's a lot of different pastes you can do in Excel, and so you can either access that by hitting the Control key or just clicking this menu. And one of the options is called a transpose, which don't worry, you'll get to that in linear algebra. But basically what that does is it flips around your matrix. So if I hit that, you can see there is an order. And so an AHP table, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing our Y option to our X option. And so this square here is going to be hitting over hitting. This square over here is going to be hitting over fielding, hitting over running, hitting over X factor, and so on. And the higher the number, the more important the factor is. But hitting over hitting, those are obviously going to be equal. So that's going to get a 1. And same thing for fielding over fielding, running over running, X factor over X factor. So you're always going to have 1s on your diagonal. Now let's compare hitting over fielding. I'm just going to make sure I stay consistent here. So I think personally, and we could debate this some other time, that hitting is twice as important as fielding. So because I think that hitting is twice as important as fielding, it's going to get a 2. Meanwhile, I think hitting is a lot more important than running. So I'm going to say that it's 5 times more important. So running or hitting over running is going to get a 5. And an X factor, not quite as important as fielding in my mind, but at the same time, a lot more important than running. So I'm going to actually give it 4. So I'm saying that hitting is 4 times as important as an X factor. So let's move on and look at fielding. So let's compare fielding to running. Now I think these are actually pretty close, at least closer than the hitting was, but I still think fielding is more important, so I'm going to give it a 2. So I'm saying that fielding is 2 times as important as running. And then actually, I think fielding and X factor might be the same. So I'm going to say that they're just as important, or it gets a 1. And you're allowed to do that with your factors. They don't have to, one doesn't have to be more important than another. They can be equally as important. Finally, let's look at running versus an X factor. Now, X factor, people ask, what does that mean? I think it's the ability to make plays, maybe hit, in the clutch. Again, maybe they're my favorite team, maybe they're fun to watch. And I actually think a lot of running plays are an X factor play. Stealing home plate, stealing a bag, running down a fly ball. And so I actually think that an X factor might be important as running. So I'm going to say that the X factor is twice as important as running. So we can say that 1 running is equivalent to 2 X factors. And again, you're allowed to do that. Oh, and here we go. We got a problem. So it's taking it as a date. I don't want that. I want it to take it as a fraction. So I'm going to go over here, and you see here's custom. So it automatically thinks when I hit 1, 2 that I'm trying to say, January 2nd. Or I think I said February, whatever, either January 2nd or February 1st. But I want it to take it as a fraction. So there's my fraction. So I can scroll down, you see how all the different options. I select a fraction. So when I do 1 divided by 2, it's going to take it as a fraction, as 1/2. Now that I have all these figured out, each one of these is just going to be the opposite across the diagonal. So here we compared hitting to fielding. Here we're comparing fielding to hitting. Now those are just the opposite of one another. So what I can do is I can use the formula function in Excel, which again we signify Excel by putting an equal sign. And it's just going to be the inverse. So we're going to take 1 over fielding. Similarly, here we compared hitting to running, and over here we're comparing running to hitting, just the other way around. So just like that, it's also going to be 1 over that. Oops. 1 over that. Okay, enter, and there we go. And you do the same thing, running in the X factor, so we're going to do that over here. So you can also just kind of scroll over, you don't have to click, you can enter a formula in and start doing 1 over this, and then you can just move around with your up and down arrows, side to side arrows as you please. So here we're doing running to fielding, so we find the inverse of fielding to running right across the diagonal. And then same thing here. We just keep going as that. Let's see, I did that. Oh, that was wrong. X factor to fielding, so we do fielding to X factor. There we go. And you can easily double check this just by looking across the table. The one half, or 1 over 1/2 is 2, 1 over 1 is 1, 1 over 2 is 1/2, and so on. And actually, you see we have a mix of things here, and I would actually like to see this in fractions. So I can select a square, and then if you hit Shift Control in an arrow, it's going to bring you to the end and highlight the whole row. And I can also do that going down. So if I hit Shift Control down here, it's going to highlight that whole table. And then I can go over to my formatting, and I want fractions, and we'll move the whole thing to fractions, which I think is a lot easier to look at. And you see these are also kind of like, this one's in the middle, this one's over here on the right. I think that's a little hard to look at. So I want everything centered, so I can go over to alignment and hit center and center. And there you go. Everything's more or less centered. Now to find my factors, or the weighting, excuse me, you first have to sum up everything. So this is going to be the sums, or we can call it totals. That might be a little easier. Means the same thing. And so again, we could do the equal sign and then highlight the entire row. And then that's going to add up the whole row. Oops, I did not. So you'd have to type out sum, and then you hit the tab to select that, and then you highlight the entire row. Close it off with a parenthesis, and you got it. And now the other cool thing about Excel is that if you copy a square and then select where you want to paste it, it'll copy that formula and apply it. So you can see up here we did D2 to G3. Oh, I wanted that D3. There we go. So we adjust that. There we go. So you can see this was D3 to G3, and then I dragged the square down. I just copied it down one. And there's D4 to G4. There's D5 to G5, and D6 to G6. Now to add this all up, I can do the same sum function, and then you can also type out a formula if you know which squares you're looking for. So I'm going H3 to H6, which you can tell by looking at your rows and your columns. Close it off, and you have a sum there. Now 2 1/5, 4 1/4, those aren't the easiest things to look at. So what I can do is I can go and highlight this, and I can change this from a fraction back to a number, and there you go. So you have 2.2 instead of 2 1/5. And you can adjust the number of decimal places, say you want to get more or even less. And I think we're fine with 2 here. So there we have our totals. Now to find the weights, how you would calculate that, I think I'm going to run out of time on this recording.
And so for those of you who remember how you do a weight normally is you take the individual score for each item that you're doing and then divide it by the total score. So we can do that in Excel. Whoops. Through again, signifying our equal sign here that we're doing a function, taking the value that we're looking at, so this is the total for hitting, and then dividing it for the total number, or the total score. And you can see there's a weight, so hitting is pretty heavily weighted at just about, 0.5. And then we can copy that down to get the same, to get the weights for each one of the other items. But as you see here, we're going to get a divide by zero error. And that's because the way that Excel handles formulas. So we told it that we were doing H3 through H7. And so when we copy that down one, it's going to do H4 divided by H8, which as you can see down here, H8 is not defined. And the same thing is going to be H5 and H9. So we're going to undo that. And the way that you can tell Excel, to cool down a little bit, take a chill pill, is if you hit F4 on any cell that you're referencing. So cell that you're referencing here would be like H3, which you can see in blue, and H7. Those are two cells that we're referencing. So if you put your cursor next to either one of these items and hit F4, it's going to add in dollar signs, which tells Excel that as you're copying a formula, you're going to hold that cell constant. So you can either, again, do that through hitting F4, or you can individually type in dollar signs, but F4 is a lot quicker. So again, that's your F4 key. And so now that we have the dollar signs in there and we copy this down, Excel is going to know to cool it a little bit and hold the bottom constant. So you can see here's our total for hitting, H3 divided by the total. Here's our total for fielding divided by the total, and so on. And so now we have all of our weights. And if you remember, the one thing we can do to check that our weights are calculated correctly is that they should all sum to 1. Similarly, you can also do these like times 100 if you want to get like a whole number, and then in that case, they should just add up to 100. But either way, they should add up to either 1 or 100 depending on how you do your calculations. And so we're going to go over to the formulas, just do it a different way. Go to Math and Trig, and you can see there's sines, arcsines, logs, all kinds of things you could do. But we're going to go down to sums, and there's a lot of different sum functions, and they're all really cool. But today we're only going to worry about this actual sum, and it's going to ask you for some inputs. And so you can either list out like each individual number, or if you don't want to do that, because that can take a little bit, especially for larger numbers, groups. I know we have 4 here. Easier way to do it is just highlight. And so just double check that I highlighted the right ones. Yep, I did. And you hit OK, and then it adds up to 1. We did it right. And then, just because I want to show you, we can say, hey, I want some more decimal places, and see, did it very nicely. So that's how you create an AHP table. And then just because I'm a little OCD about these things, I just want to show you what I like to do. I like to create it into a table other than just some free-floating numbers. So again, you can hit that Shift-Control arrow to highlight the whole thing. Shift-Control down arrow this time. Down arrow one more time. And we have the whole table highlighted. Then I'm going to add in some thick outside borders to separate it off. Then I want my headers to be separated. So again, Shift-Control arrow, highlight that whole row. We're just going to do a regular bottom border this time. I'm going to hit Control-B, bold my headers. Do a similar thing over here on the side. We're going to do a side border. Bold these as well. And then, just because I'm feeling a little extra OCD right now, we're going to do a bottom border down here too. Separate out the totals from those over there, and also separate out the weights. So there's a very clean looking table, and then I'm going to highlight these because these are my interests. And then let's say you were looking to try to do this in a report. Generally that's a lot of different decimal places. Normally in this case 2 would be fine. Sig figs are a little tricky here because you're basically deciding them. And so generally again 2 sig figs is good for these. Whoops, that is one too many. Anyway, so that's the AHP table. If this, I think I've been talking pretty slowly, probably painfully slowly. Hopefully you've been watching this at least 2 times speed. But if you want to review any of this, you can go over the annotated solution, and I walk through a lot of it up in here. And so now that we have our weighting factors, we're able to do our decision matrix. And so again, pause the video, look through this annotated solution before, but I'm going to save some time here and just copy and paste a table that I already did a little earlier just to save some time rather than typing it all out. But again, so while the AHP or the analytical hierarchy process is good for creating our weighting factors, the decision matrix is good for actually comparing our different options or different solutions, whatever you want to call them. And so I'm just going to clear this out so that we can fill it in as we go. And then another cool trick you can do in Excel for spacing reasons is you can highlight a specific row or a specific column or a specific row. And you can then double click this. So that's the side, and it'll automatically size it. So you can see the names were kind of crammed, and I can see them more closely. Or what you can also do is you can highlight your entire sheet and then double click any row, and it'll automatically space them all out. So it's easier to read and look at. So again, the format we follow here is you're going to put whatever criteria you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at our hitting criteria, we're looking at our fielding criteria, and then we're going to put in the score that each option or each solution has in that. You need to know the weighting, and that's going to come directly from our AHP table. And then you're going to calculate the score from that so you can add things up. It's optional to include this. So I'll show you real fast is, let's say for whatever score is, we're going to have a 10, and then let's say the weighting is 0.1. You can just very quickly do that times that to get your score. Let's say you're already doing this like in Excel. You don't really need this because you're going to have the weighting over here. So we could just delete that weighting. We don't even need that column in our table. And instead, you could just set that your score is going to be equal to whatever value you give it times its weighting, and you can get that from your AHP matrix. And so there's our hitting score, and then there would be our hitting weight, and there would be our hitting score. And this is something you'll develop as you go along. But really in Excel, you don't want to be typing out things. So you want to be able to draw from other cells. So then if those cells change, then you can update, then your entire table updates automatically. So the example here would be, let's say we're trying to do our decision matrix, we're getting our scores, and we go back and we say, hey, I think we did our AHP table a little wrong. Like, I don't think we're here, we said that the X factor is more important than running. Let's say we have a change of heart and we actually think, I actually think running is a lot more important than the X factor, and I want to change that to a 5. You can see our entire table updates, including the weighted hitting score. And that's just going to save you a lot of time rather than, let's say when we were doing that. So originally we had 1/2 over here. If we wrote this as 2 instead of the inverse of that, and we were to change that to 5, it throws off our table. And it just doesn't work well anymore. The long-winded speech was that you want to define cells from other cells. So that means when we're going to go through, so let's go through and do the example here, is we're going to put our weight for hitting. We're going to reference it from the AHP table. We're not going to write out 0.52. So we're not going to do 0.52 here and go with that. We're going to make sure we're defining it from the table. And as such, we're actually just going to copy and paste that down. And again, this entire column is optional. You can just get it directly from it. But I'm going to, again, hit F4 to define this. So then I can just copy and paste this down. And then you're going to notice that it also cleared out my formatting. That's just something Excel does when you copy and paste. It'll often clear the formatting. So a way to get around this, I'm going to undo that, is that as I copy and paste it down, you're going to see I have an option here for control paste. So just like I did a special paste earlier with the transpose, if I were to instead hit F and do the formula, it's just going to copy the formula without taking any of the formatting. And you see there it keeps it. And so let's just very quickly get all of our weights in. So we did that for hitting. Let's do the same thing for fielding. We're going to set it equal to that weight. And then I'm actually going to go back and hit F2 to edit it quickly, F4 to change it so it doesn't change quickly, and then copy and paste it down. And then Control F. This is why, trying to get fluid with the keyboard is a lot better than clicking around because you'll save a lot of time. And then we'll do the same thing with the running. So again, that's equals. Go over and hit that. F4 so it stays constant. And then copy and paste it down. Control F just for the formula. And then same thing with the X factor. Click F4, copy, paste, Control F. There we go. And so we have all of our weights in now. And now this is where we're going to go in and we're going to define our scores. And this is where you have to be careful, not so much in this example, but you see I gave an example in the annotated solution where you have to be careful defining each criteria. So for hitting, fielding, running, and the X factor, it's pretty simple. The better a player is at that, the higher the score. But let's say instead of doing like different fields, I was looking at just hitting, or looking at say like home runs, runs batted in, which are both good things, but also strikeouts. So more home runs is good, more RBIs is good, more runs batted in, but more strikeouts is not good. So, where for most of the criteria there, we would be defining more is better. For the strikeouts, we got to make sure more is actually worse. So the more strikeouts we have, the lower the score. Anyway, so we have DJ LeMahieu. He's one of the batting champions right now. Pretty good hitter, but unfortunately, Mike Trout is one of the best hitters ever, so he's going to get a 10, and we'll define LeMahieu. Doesn't quite have the power, but still a very high average. We'll give him an 8. And then Tatis Jr. is having a breakout season. We'll see what he does. We'll also give him an 8. They're all very good hitters. Fielding. DJ LeMahieu's. We'll go through with the final right now. So DJ LeMahieu is one of the best defensive infielders. Plays Bristol role. He gets a 10. Mike Trout, go look about highlight reel, robs home runs left and right. We're going to give him an 8. You're not quite gold glove, but one below that. Fernando Tatis Jr., he's flashy, makes a lot of errors, still pretty good. We'll give him a 6. He's still above average. Running. DJ LeMahieu is literally the definition of an average runner. He gets a 5. Mike Trout, he's pretty quick, getting a little older, slowing down a bit, but still very fast. He gets an 8. Tatis Jr. is electric on the base path. He's flying over left and right. Makes a lot of rangy plays, too. The X Factor. DJ LeMahieu plays on my favorite team. He gets a 10 just because he's a Yankee. Mike Trout, one of the greatest players of all time, greatest player of his generation, great overall guy. He gets an 8. Just want to make sure I'm matching what I did earlier. And actually, I gave, this matches. And then we look over and we see Fernando Tatis Jr. He's young, he's up and coming, he's flashy, he's fun. He gets a 7. A little below Mike Trout, but he's still fun to watch. All right, so we have all our scores. Now it's time to get our weighted scores. And so to do that, again, we're going to do an equal sign, and you're just going to multiply your raw value by the weight. And so, the raw value multiplied by the weight. And then we can just drag this formula down. So another way to copy a formula is to highlight a square and then take it from the bottom right-hand corner and drag it down, and then that'll flash fill it. We see it clears my formatting out again. So I got to tell it fill without formatting. You can see it keeps it. So there's our weighted scores. And then we can actually copy these formulas right here and then just paste them. And it actually will incorporate in the right squares because Excel is nice like that. And that's one of the advantages of using Excel. You see there's our weighted scores, and we can just do that again. Highlight these ones. Doesn't matter, you can highlight these 3 or those 3, and then just put them in there. And then let's see, same thing there. And you see that, yes, it's taking the right squares. So now we have all of our weighted factors, and now it's time to calculate our totals. And so now that we have all of our individual scores, we can now sum them together. So again, using the same sum function we've been using, so equals sum, tab, and then we'll just hit each score in the row that we want to sum for each player. Oops. Make sure you're adding in commas. And there we go. Close out the parenthesis. There's that score. And we'll just copy it down. Again, Control F so we don't lose that nice line we have at the bottom. Highlight the whole table or the whole sheet. Hit the side of any individual column. We got the spacing. And there's each one of our scores. And so I'm going to knock down these decimal places a little bit. Actually, we'll do that for the whole table. Okay. And, well, that's too many. And there we go. So we can see that from our table, I'm actually going to have to zoom out just a little bit. We can see that we concluded that Mike Trout was our best player, followed by DJ LeMahieu, and then by Fernando Tatis Jr. And so I think these numbers ended up a little different than what I used in the annotated solution. Yeah, just a little bit. They're pretty close. So, thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. Again, we just went over, basic Excel. So, and then how to make an AHP table decision matrix. Use that to familiarize yourself a little bit with the Excel layout, editing cells, basic introduction to formula. Again, this is really just scratching the surface. There's a lot more you can do. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to help out. As always, like, share, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. Thank you for listening, and good luck with your AHP tables and your decision matrices in the future. Thank you.